Welcome to the Veriscope channel where we're going to continue the analysis of Wendi. We got up to the aha moment 9 in the previous video, but what we're going to do in this video is show you exactly where Miss Adelson lies categorically, blatantly on the stand. We'll play that now and then we'll go back to the analysis, but I want to show you this now because some of you leave the video early or you're busy and you don't have time to see the entire analysis. So I'm going to show you now where she lies to your face blatantly, openly, categorically, without a shadow of a doubt, in her own words. Listen.
Actually, oh wait, still going.
Is this a question that you need refreshing on? Did your husband make these allegations? You don't have an independent recollection of that?
I don't have an independent recollection.
Okay.
He made a lot of allegations that weren't true.
So, when we do forensic linguistics and statement analysis, one of the skills is active listening. It can happen really quickly. It can happen very fast. Look what she says. I made a lot of allegations that weren't true. This is because she's been put under pressure by the prosecutor, who talks to her previously about the ridiculousness of arguing over a tennis racket in the divorce case. As a result of that, Wendi's mind is spinning. And when somebody lies at the unconscious level, it's very difficult because there's an area of the brain responsible for pronouns called the broca. It's part of the brain responsible for language, for word selection. And we have about 30 or 40,000 words which we would commonly use. And this is known as our personal dictionary. And pronouns such as I or we, they come from the area of the brain called the broca, and they come unconsciously because they have to be chosen at such a speed in conversation that there's no time to think. So they come from the unconscious mind. And when somebody isn't paying attention to their lies, what can happen is the truth comes out. A slip of the tongue is an expression that we all know. And so here we have an example, or poker players might call it a tell, or professional con people might call it a tell. She says, I made a lot of allegations that weren't true. What she was trying to say was he made a lot of allegations that weren't true. But what actually came out was the truth. Listen again.
That you need refreshing on? Did your husband make these allegations? You don't have an independent recollection of that?
I don't have an independent recollection.
Okay.
He made a lot of allegations that weren't true, so I need to look through to figure out which ones we're talking about.
So even the prosecutor missed that, and it's not surprising. At conversational speed, most of these lies and most of these tells are missed because they're very small. They're in the unconscious pronouns or sometimes the articles such as a or the, which the brain gets wrong. A quick thank you to the trial channel for allowing us to use the video. What we're going to do is we're going to run through the analysis. We got up to number 9. So if you haven't seen the previous videos, please go back on the Veriscope channel and have a look. If you're new to the Veriscope channel, we do an analysis most days on crimes, and normally crimes where the person is no longer there to speak for themselves. So if justice is something that you would like to support, and crimes and statement analysis and deception detection is something that you're interested in, Please do subscribe. It's also a wonderful skill to learn in your own life, where you can spot deception, or if someone's trying to gaslight you, or if someone's being slightly untruthful. It's a wonderful skill to learn. And every day we're going through a particular analysis of a section of a trial, normally, and we're spotting where the lies are. So let's carry on with where we're going to repeat some of where we got to yesterday, but we're going to go into detail now and see where Wendy's being deceptive.
What types of things did your mother suggest that you could do to try to coerce or acquire the ability to relocate your kids to Miami?
She suggested that I could change the religion.
Of who?
Of my children.
And why would that affect the relocation effort?
Because religion was so important to Danny that would be a real hot button thing.
Okay. And did she ever suggest that you could bribe your husband to allow the relocation?
She did.
And how much money did she suggest that she and the family would be willing to put up for such a bribe?
So I just saw the bribe reference, but I didn't see the amount. If you want to show me.
I will refresh you on that.
Okay, so just before she's refreshed on the bribe, and I believe the bribe was for $1 million. I don't think that Dan actually received the bribe, and certainly from what I've heard, he isn't the sort of character that would have taken the bribe of $1 million to move anyway. And it's likely that Wendi and her family saw it as a lot cheaper to have him killed, which is what the family ended up doing. Whether Wendi or not is involved in that is yet to be proven in a court of law. So she's innocent as it stands today. She's not been arrested or charged yet. However, her brother has been convicted and her mother has been convicted. So let's have a look at what she's just said. The prosecutor says, what types of things did your mother suggest that you could do to try to coerce or acquire the ability to relocate your kids to Miami? Listen to what Wendi says. She suggested that I could change the religion of my children. And why would that affect the relocation effort? Wendi says, because, and forgive the transcript error just above. Wendi says, because religion was so important to Danny, that would be. So here, if you're new to forensic linguistics, where we see a repeated phrase, this is what we call sensitivity due to cognitive load. So stress is an easy way to explain that. That would be. It's also a way to buy cognitive time to think of your answer. So it depends on the circumstances, but where we see repetition of phrases or words, we mark it, and in would go deceptive flags. And single deceptive flags in forensic linguistics don't necessarily mean anything per se. What we do is we look for clusters and superclusters of these flags before we start to determine if a sentence is deceptive or not. But then she goes on to say a real hot button thing. So then we start to analyze the sentence. We saw the repetition, that would be the stuttering or the sensitivity. We see hot button, so they know or they knew Dan's vulnerabilities. And we see strategy in their discussions together with the mother, Donna, who's been sentenced, as I said before, to life in prison without parole. We see strategy discussed manipulating via the children's religion. So Wendi and her mother are discussing how to manipulate Dan via the children's religion. Notice when Wendi says it with her smile and her doe eyes, she makes it sound innocent. But when we actually linguistically analyze, we see what she's really doing with her gaslighting techniques, her manipulation techniques. So what this reveals, Donna suggested changing the children's religion as a weapon. Together, they strategized about Dan's emotional vulnerabilities. Hot button reveals they knew how to hurt him. The stuttering, I've just stuttered myself, haven't I? The stuttering and the sensitivity shows sensitivity about manipulating via religion. This was calculated psychological warfare before the murder. So as a principle of statement analysis, repetition of phrase, that would be in this case, marks high sensitivity. She's admitting they strategized about Dan's emotional vulnerabilities and how to exploit them for their desired outcome. Let's go back to the testimony.
Highlighted portion, let me know if that refreshes the reflection.
Okay.
How much money was your family willing to put up to bribe Dan Markel to let you move to Miami for kids?
They said that they would go as high as $1 million, which would be $333,000 each.
And who are the each?
My mom, my dad, and Charlie.
Okay, so it's important for this lady to remove herself from suspicion. So she chooses to split the $1 million bribe into 3. But rather than herself, Charlie, and her parents, she chooses to separate her parents into 2, Donna and her father, Harvey, and Charlie. So that a third each comes to the $1 million, conveniently leaving her third unaccounted for. Do you see?
Did Charlie, you mentioned he also lived in South Florida. Was he employed at the family dental practice?
He worked there sometimes.
And what type of work did he do?
He is a periodontist, so he would sometimes do implants or surgery for people.
Did your motion for relocation get granted or denied by the court?
It was denied by the court.
So you were not legally permitted to move to Miami?
No.
Did you have an alternative? You mentioned previously that there was a hostile work environment at Florida State University as a result of your husband. Or your ex-husband at this point, was the failure to be able to relocate, did that cause you to remain in that environment?
It did.
For how long?
I don't remember the date that the petition to relocate was denied. If you could show me the binder, I could find the date.
And I'll draw you to pages 262 and 263.
In the binder? Oh. Okay, so the order was on June, no, what the date is. It was June 20th, 2013. So I was still working at the law school through July 2014, so I stayed for 1 more year.
Okay, and it was subsequent to his death that you were able to find new employment that was in a less hostile work environment.
She finds it difficult to maintain this ridiculous facial expression that she does, with the wide eyes and the mouth open and the childish "I'm innocent as the driven snow, Bambi in the woods" look. It's hard for her physically to maintain this look. It's not her natural look. And as a result of that, her breathing is affected. So she finds it difficult to breathe and difficult to swallow. So keep a lookout for what she's actually doing. And it's acting. And when we see acting, we put in a deceptive marker.
Accurate?
I mean, eventually after his death, I found new employment. It took me a little while.
Okay. How long did you stay in Tallahassee after your husband was killed? Ex-husband, sorry.
I stayed a couple of days. And then after I had asked the police for protection at the funeral or in my home, and they refused, I decided to just go for a couple of days and spend a few days away from Tallahassee. And then this case hit CNN and hit the media, and I didn't
I don't
feel
mean to
safe.
interrupt you, but the question was, how long did you stay in Tallahassee after your husband was killed?
I'm sorry, Ms. Cappleman. I stayed for a few days.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, so let's have a look at the actual analysis. Where did we get up to? We got up to, oh yes, so the timeline. Court denies Wendy's relocation petition. Post-denial, Donna's very upset. We have massive minimization of rage. Family offers $1 million bribe, $330,000 each. Donna, Harvey, and Charlie being claimed as the three rather than Wendi. And whether or not the offer arrived to Dan, we don't know. Perhaps if you do, say in the comments. But perhaps Wendi decided, or somebody else decided that it would be cheaper to hire the hitmen. Then we have Dan files the motion to restrict Donna's access to the children in March of 24. Then in July, Dan Markel is murdered 4 months after the restriction motion. So Donna's absolutely furious with rage, and the murder occurs. Donna is now in jail, well, prison rather. And then a few days later, Wendi leaves Tallahassee permanently, and I've heard that she was completely packed up and ready to go on the morning of the murder. Isn't that interesting? So if you know more about that, please put that in the comments as well, so that we can determine the timeline. Now she's blamed it. If you heard, she's tried to blame it on CNN, and the prosecutor wasn't having any of that. Wendy's tried to blame CNN reporting the murder as to why she scarpered and went to Miami. So Wendi moves to Miami with the children almost immediately and gets the relocation that Donna wanted, and probably the main motive for the murder. So prior to the murder, we heard previously, was your divorce impacting your family financially? Wendi said, so this is prior to the murder, and this, and here we have a break, so we call this self-censorship. It can also be purchasing more cognitive time to think. Either way, the sentence gets interrupted and then she restarts a new sentence. It was certainly impacting me financially, she says. This is her all over. But and when we see this pronoun stutter of the I's, what normally follows on the average is deceptive, especially when we see sometimes 3 or 4 of these I pattern. So here we see the double I pattern. Percentage-wise, it's more likely to be deceptive than not, she says, but I don't think when we see something in the negative in statement analysis, it's doubly important to us. We start paying more attention in the negative. I don't think it was impacting the rest of my family. So, certainly finances for her could have been part of the motivation for the murder. I understand that there was some life insurance that Wendi doesn't have direct access to, but is for the boys and is managed, I think, by somebody else. I'm not sure. Again, if you know the details of the life insurance money, And if Wendi has indeed benefited from that in some way, or whether she has to fill in forms to get access to the money, I don't know. So we have an unprompted timeline marker. We have, with the words prior to, it creates a temporal boundary. And we have that small stuttering with the incomplete thought and the censored, the self-censorship and the double I pronoun pattern. So the murder is a dividing line in her psychological timeline. She separates pre-murder from post-murder psychologically, automatically. And the stutter suggests she almost said something else, but we'll never know. But we mark it in forensic linguistics. And question didn't mention murder, she introduced it. So where the subject introduces the subject, again, it's very important for us to note that. When someone introduces a critical event as a timeline marker without being asked, it reveals psychological significance. Before the murder versus after the murder. The murder changed everything in Wendi's life structure. So, of course, psychologically, it's going to show itself in her language. And then we have some post-murder departure vagueness with how long did you stay in Tallahassee after your husband was killed? Late husband, I believe, the prosecutor then says. And then after I asked the police for protection at the funeral or in my home, and they refused. So here we have blaming others for her being packed up and ready to scarper. I decided to just go. Here we have a minimization word, which we take note of. So she's trying to minimize. First of all, she's blaming others, and then she's minimizing her reason. I decided to just go for a couple of days. Rubbish. The motivation for the murder was to leave. This wasn't to just go for a couple of days at all. She's lying. And spend a few days away, lie, and then this case hit CNN and hit the media, and absolute rubbish. The prosecutor doesn't have any truck for it. Says, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the question was, how long did you stay in Tallahassee after your husband was killed? Wendi aggressively says, I'm sorry, Miss Cappleman, realizes that this isn't I'm sorry. This is an attack, realizing she's on the witness stand, self-censors and answers the question. Outside of the court, this would have carried on to a lecture type of response. But she forces herself to stop and then answer the question reluctantly. Okay, let's go back to watching her answer questions.
So how did your mom take the news that you were not going to be able to relocate?
She was very upset.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about the litigation that continued after your divorce was final. Was there a motion to enforce the marital settlement agreement and hold Dan Markel in contempt of court filed by you?
Yes.
And a few months later, did he respond with a counter motion to enforce the marital settlement agreement's final provisions, alleging some violations that he said you made on the marital settlement agreement?
Yes.
And these filings are pretty venomous. Is that a fair characterization?
Not on my part.
Well, on both your parts, right?
Ha! Not on my part, she says. I mean, the arrogance. And look at her face. The absolute arrogance of this woman who has had her family murder her ex-husband.
No, ma'am.
Okay. And he accuses you of various things, lying about your financial affidavit and things like that. Would you agree?
He does make those accusations. They were completely baseless, but yes.
All right. And
so the accusations that she is accused of are completely baseless, she would have us believe. Look at the face. She doesn't like the prosecutor at all. And the reason why the prosecutor has no respect for Wendi, but Wendi hates the prosecutor. Absolutely hates her. And the reason is the prosecutor can see straight through her. The prosecutor can see who she is. And the prosecutor knows what she's done. Wendi knows she knows. And she hates it.
oh, in the pleadings, is the tennis racket mentioned as something to fight over? And I can draw your attention to that page in line if you need it.
I imagine it could have been. You can draw my attention if you like, and I can confirm.
Okay, but no reason to argue about this.
Okay, so she knows full well that she's been ridiculous about the tennis racket. But she tries to make it sound as if Dan is responsible for the one that's been ridiculous about the tennis racket. And then she challenges the prosecutor to point it out in the documentation. The prosecutor doesn't get drawn in and porcupines it, that's a technique, throws it back basically, and says, well, is there any reason? Anyway, let's listen.
That a tennis racket is mentioned specifically in your divorce documents.
I mean, that sounds like some of the nonsense that we argued over, sure.
Okay. And
then she backs down and admits, but won't say I, we. So notice her use of pronouns. When she wants, she uses we, and when she doesn't necessarily want, she uses I. That's important. So we have the we pronoun used here, incorrectly as it happens, in order to take responsibility off her and share in the crowd responsibility with Dan. That's important because we're going to hear fairly shortly her make a mistake with the I pronoun. When I say a mistake, she's going to tell the truth. The tennis racket has been chosen by the prosecutor on purpose to destabilize Wendi. And it works. Watch what happens.
was there a motion? I want to draw your attention specifically to this motion. It's on page 441 of that document in front of you, Exhibit 59. This motion was filed by Dan Markel on March 26th of 2014, so shortly before his death.
I see it.
Okay, what was that motion?
Former husband's counter motion for enforcement of MSA on parenting issues and motion for contempt and sanctions.
And in that motion, did he allege that you were violating the marital settlement agreement in a variety of ways?
Yes, it looks like he did.
Including failing to facilitate communication between he and the boys, failing to keep him informed of where his kids are, failure to communicate about parenting decisions like the kids' schooling, diet, and extracurricular activities, things like that.
Yes, that looks right.
All right. And was he, as part of this motion, seeking to enjoin you from allowing your mother to have time with the children that was unsupervised by another adult?
I am not seeing that right now, but I can continue reading through it.
Okay, take your time.
Actually, oh wait, still going.
Is this a question that you need refreshing on? Did your husband make these allegations? You don't have an independent recollection of that?
I don't have an independent recollection.
Okay.
I made a lot of allegations that weren't true, so I need.
Boom. And there we have it. I made a lot of allegations that weren't true. Out of her own mouth comes the admission that she is a liar, and she has admitted this on the witness stand under oath. She admits she's a liar.
Look through to figure out which ones we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay, I see it. I see what you're referencing.
All right, so in that filing, Dan Markel alleges that your mother is disparaging him to the children, correct?
That is correct.
And he was seeking a court order saying she couldn't have contact with the kids unless there was another adult present, correct?
I see that here. I don't think I took it seriously at the time, so it didn't really lodge in my memory.
Did your mom take it seriously?
No.
Was it ever ruled on?
I don't know. If it were, it should be here, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it here?
No, it's not. It was scheduled to be ruled on in August of 2014, right?
Okay, she tried to trick the prosecutor there. She thought she was being clever. She thought perhaps the prosecutor hadn't done her homework, because this lady, Wendi, has been preparing for this trial consistently. She's probably been doing nothing else. She knows full well it's not in the documentation. She knows full well it's not in the file. This little act of pretending to look through it is an act. She knows every single piece of paper in there. She tried to trick the prosecutor, but the prosecutor was one step ahead of her, as she always has been. And I suspect if Wendi is arrested shortly, and if a grand jury decides to ensure that there's a trial for the murder, then she will still be one step ahead of her. So let's go back to the actual analysis. Where are we? Where did we get to? Do excuse me. Oh yes, this was the leaving Tallahassee in a rush. A couple of days, a few days, everything except the answer. Police refuse protection, media coverage as the justification. Simple question receives complex, evasive answer. She needs to explain why she left. She changes the number from a couple to a few. When we see a change in language, we note that in statement analysis. Building justification, the police wouldn't help, the media descended, and the prosecutor has to interrupt to get the actual answer from Wendi. When someone rambles in response to a simple direct question, they're avoiding the answer. So in go the deceptive flags. This is talking about her mother being very upset, so she minimizes Donna's rage. So how did your mum take the news that you were not going to be able to relocate? The prosecutor asks. She was very upset. Short answer to a significant question. Very upset, so she's minimizing word choice. She doesn't really want to go into detail here. Notice Wendy's quite happy to go into rambling detail where it suits her. And she's an experienced lawyer, I understand. So she's also quite skilled at keeping it very short when it doesn't suit her. Where we notice skill being used to avoid the entire truth coming out, that in itself becomes a deceptive marker. What this reveals. Donna's reaction was more than very upset. This is massive minimization, partly because it shows the motive for the murder. Don't forget, at this point in history, her mother hasn't yet been found guilty. So the motivation to stay away from anything that will hurt her mother is still present in the current linguistics here. This is a woman willing to pay $1 million. She was likely to be enraged, not very upset. This is the woman who called Dan an arsehole, a bully, a zealot, a jackass, an extremist. We know that fury is the motivation for murder. But here we have the pronoun confession from Wendi. The prosecutor asks, is this a question that you need refreshing on? Did your husband make these allegations? You don't have an independent recollection of that? Wendi says, I don't have an independent recollection. Okay, I made a lot of allegations that weren't true. So I need to look through to figure out which ones we're talking about. She says, I made a lot of allegations that weren't true. This cognitive error is because the broker has chosen to tell the truth. At the unconscious level, this is the wonderful thing about people. At the unconscious level, we are truthful beings. I see this more and more. We truly are. It's our conscious mind that wants to lie. But our unconscious doesn't often go along with that. We're truthful in our hearts. And so it comes out. She says, I made a lot of allegations that weren't true. The critical analysis. The prosecutor is asking if Dan made allegations. Wendi says, I made a lot of allegations that weren't true. She likely means he made, talking about Dan, but she says, I made, talking about herself. People can sometimes say this is a Freudian slip or a critical pronoun error. If it's a slip, she's confessing she made false allegations. And if it's an error, it shows psychological ownership of false statements. This is more common than you would think. And so that's why we practice active listening. If you're interested in learning more about statement analysis and forensic linguistics, in the membership part of the Veroscope YouTube channel, we're going into more detail. So do consider joining as a member of the Veroscope channel if this is something that you're interested in learning in more detail. Let's go on with the actual transcript.
I don't know when it was scheduled for. I do know that nobody took it very seriously.
Okay, so your mom wasn't worried about that motion being granted. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your brother. You can just sort of close that binder and leave it in front of you if that's okay. How old is your brother, Charlie Adelson?
He is 45.
Is he your older or younger brother?
I have two older brothers, so he is one of the two older brothers.
Are you closer to one more than the other?
Yes.
Which one are you closer to?
Charlie.
And has that always been the case, or just since this case?
No, it's not since this case. I think when we were kids, I was probably closest to my oldest brother, and then after getting to be an adult myself around my 20s, I was probably closer to my middle brother.
Okay, if you know more detail about the relationships with the brothers, please put those in the comments. I understand that there's quite a bit of distance now with one of the brothers. who doesn't really want anything to do with the family involved in the murder. I don't know an awful lot about that, so if you do, please put that in the comments. Let's listen to Wendi lie one more time.
Actually, oh wait, still going.
Is this a question that you need refreshing on? Did your husband make these allegations? You don't have an independent recollection of that?
I don't have an independent recollection.
Okay.
I made a lot of allegations that weren't true, so I need to.
There we are. Okay, so let's complete the analysis. I don't think I took it seriously. The prosecutor says, so in that filing, Dan Markel alleges that your mother is disparaging him to the children, correct? That is correct. And he was seeking a court order saying she couldn't have contact with the kids unless there was another adult present. Wendi says, I see that here. I don't think I took it seriously at the time, so it didn't really lodge in my memory, she would have us believe. So something as serious as this, she's trying to make us believe that she can't really remember much about it. I don't think. So here we have a hedge on dismissal. We look out for this sort of language. It's hedging language. We note it and we would put in a deceptive marker. Took it seriously, minimizes the importance. The context here is Dan wanted to restrict Donna's access to the children. Donna's furious enough to kill. Wendi says it didn't lodge. She tries to explain to us why she can't remember this bit. Why? Because it's the motive for the murder. So what we're seeing is consciousness of guilt. What this reveals, Dan wanted to restrict her mother's access to the children. This would be huge, not something easily dismissed. But Wendi, she claims that she didn't take it seriously, and she's explaining why she doesn't remember. Not remembering this motion is not believable, and in my opinion, another example of Wendi directly lying on the witness stand. In fact, it's almost impossible to find an area where it's obvious that she's being truthful. It's constant deception. And that occurs when someone has consciousness of guilt. So, I think that brings us to the end of today's analysis. If you saw the previous part of this trial where we went through her statement, in total we've got 62 deception indicators just in this small section of the trial. I'll run through some of them. Donna, Harvey, and Charlie offered a $1 million bribe. Wendi knows the exact breakdown, $333,000 each, although they're missing a few dollars, and attempts to explain that not her, oh no, her parents become not one, but two, and Charlie becomes the other. Donna's hatred is documented. We saw the words that she used: arsehole, bully, zealot, jackass, extremist, from Donna to Dan. We saw that the family strategized manipulating Dan by the children's religion. We saw that Dan filed a motion to restrict Donna's access to the children, and 4 months later Dan is murdered. And the result, almost immediately, Wendi scarpers to Miami with the children, having pre-packed before the murder. How did she know? How did she know to get ready? She tries to blame it on CNN. We have linguistic patterns throughout. We have minimization. She talks about her mother in her little doe-eyed way. Oh yes, Mum's a little bit over-involved, minimizing the murderess. Very upset, disappointed. We have legal hedging. I can't speak to is the phrase she uses when asked about what her mother thought. Independent recollection, I'm not alleging, etc. We have the protection of Donna. She refuses to accept the words controlling and despise and other type of language. And then we have that classic pronoun error where she admits, I made allegations that weren't true about Dan. And then we have selective memory from Wendi. She's precise on the bribe details, but very vague and can't remember an awful lot about some of the motions. And the prosecutor's devastating point, the Adelson family was willing to pay $1 million to solve the relocation problem. And when Dan refused, they found a cheaper solution. So that brings us to the end of today's analysis. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do. And if you're interested in learning more about forensic linguistics and how to do this type of analysis and how to find these sorts of deception markers, and in particular, how to ensure that you always see any attempt to gaslight or manipulate you, then do consider joining the channel as well. Okay, I look forward to speak to you in the comments.